Hello and welcome wherever you are in the world to our Goldster conversation, where we go to the heartlands of Canada for a gripping and interactive purpose, passion, and grit, which will then become a podcast. Now, over there, it is 5 in the morning, and my rugged and good-natured guest, who you will see sitting so elegantly there, has got up early to share his story with us. His career has been with the famous Canadian Royal Mounted Police, the Mounties, and he worked in the most isolated, far-flung places of that vast land, often alone, miles and hours away from any backup. And he was not always good-natured. He had downturns of lashing against those he loved, seeking solutions in drink, and letting life drag him into the darkest abyss. Many, many, many of us go through similar experiences. How do we emerge from the other side? For answers, welcome Doug Lawrence to Goldster Purpose, Passion, and Grit.
Good morning. Good, very early morning, I should say.
Are you okay? You've got enough coffee and everything with you, Doug, to keep you going?
I'm okay, yeah.
I mean, you're looking great. You don't look that sleepy.
I hide it well.
But you're a policeman. Is that a former policeman? Is that the right word of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, sort of like police officers?
Yeah, Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Yeah, and you were a peace officer, I guess, is kind of the formal terminology that they would ask you to use.
Okay. Now, the book that you've written that we're talking about is called You're Not Alone, Mental Health Mentors, Take the Journey With You. But before we get to that, I would like to talk to you about your early journey in your career, because with the Mounted Police, you were telling me you go to the most far-flung places, just you. What happens?
I was transferred to probably 3 out of 11 different places that I and my family lived in. And those 3 places were very isolated and secluded. So I was northern British Columbia, where I had the good fortune of meeting my wife at that particular stage. And then, we ended up together. We got sent way up into Victoria Island, up in the high central Arctic, and then ended up going from there back to the western side of the territories, and then from there into the eastern Arctic, up in the Hudson Bay area. So we were up in there, and that particular, I had a couple places where I was, in fact, the only police officer, or I was the one that was on call most of the time.
So you just get a call from head office to you and say, right, you've got to go to this village. What, with just a handful of people in it? How many people in these settlements?
In Hall Beach, where that was our last posting in what I would call isolation. The community, it was, if you can picture this small group of houses perched on the shore of the Arctic Ocean, that was Hall Beach. And we ended up, I was there for the 2 years by myself, other than my family. Actually, my wife, Deborah, was my backup. We had everything all sorted out, but it was predominantly a community still caught up in the old tradition of respect for the elders and all of those things. But it was a community of roughly 480 Inuit and 20 white people, of which the 20 white people would be predominantly school teachers and government staff.
And that's 400 people, one policeman. You're reminding me of Dixon of Dock Green, but which is a police thing we had here a long time ago. But what was your job? I mean, was there theft and murders and all that sort of stuff going on?
it was pretty much everything that you can imagine. A lot of it was, so it was a community that had alcohol restrictions. So you had to get approval to bring liquor into the community. And then for me, my work started when the plane came in with a load of alcohol on it and it got dispersed in the community. Then I would be getting called out at all hours of the night and would have to go and calm everybody down and hopefully get them to go to sleep for a while so I could get some sleep.
So you said that there were 20 white people and the rest of the 400 were Inuit. Did you speak their language? Do they speak English? How does all that work?
No, I sometimes when you're in situations like that where you're not sure how you're going to fare, I was able to communicate using various signs and that. And there was some small, because the Inuit communicate using facial expressions. And so I learned like what some of those were, enough that I could get by. And, I would do, basic sign languages, if I went to an elder's place to get him to go with me on a call, I would make a sign of somebody drinking and right away they knew what it was. And so they'd come hop in the police vehicle with me and away we'd go.
Okay, okay. And was this your career of choice? Were you drawn to far-flung, isolated places, or did you imagine yourself doing something else in your career?
Well, at the beginning, I really had no idea what I was in store for. But certainly, the going into the north was by choice. So you actually both, my wife Deborah and I, both of us were actually, she more than me got interviewed by our people are responsible for placing us in different spots. And so it was her interview that sort of sealed the deal of us going into the far extreme of the north to be able to do the policing there.
And she wanted to go as much as you did?
I think she wanted to be honest, probably more.
More than you did. Okay. So it wasn't that you were dragging the family with you reluctantly. She had the sort of love of these wild, open, rugged places. And now you did this for many years in different places, and you've described the community to us very well. But you're with us now because we're talking about mental health and the book that you've written. Of which one of the titles is What are the Signs and Symptoms of Mental Illness? Can you describe to me, I want to go back to the communities in a minute, but what exactly is mental health? Because if your knee goes or you get food poisoning, we all know there's something wrong and want to fix it. How do you know when your mind goes?
So I'm going to back up a little bit and come at this from the aspect of there's mental health and then there's mental illness.
Okay.
Mental health is a state of well-being, and you and I both have mental health, but we don't all have mental illness. And mental illness is actually disturbances that occur in our thoughts and feelings. That's how, that's your clinical definition of the two. And so we sometimes, probably the best way for me to describe it is there can be, within the realm of your mental health, there can be those disturbances such as anxiety, depression, all of those things. Those are disturbances in your thoughts and feelings, and that's what mental illness is all about.
Okay, that's a very clear thing. Just before we move on, Geeta says, is it 4 a.m. there? It is not. It is 5 a.m, isn't it, Doug?
5 a.m.
Tell us where you are at the moment. What part of Canada are you in?
I am in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada. So I'm in between I'm not exactly right in the middle of the East and the West, but we're in the bald prairie is how they describe it.
The Bald Prairie, because we had some confusion over the time zone of this, because you're not like in Los Angeles time, and you're not New York or Toronto time, are you? So we got there, and then so you are going from posting to posting, as it were, in these very remote areas. So you become a specialist, I guess, in this sort of thing. At what stage of your career did you realize that you had some form of mental illness, or the symptoms of mental illness?
It started. It would have started when I was in northern British Columbia. I was still relatively young in years of service, but I was also very young and somewhat naive when it came to how the work was actually impacting my own mental health.
So you in your 30s or 40s, would you say? Which?
No, it would have been late 20s.
Oh, okay, very young. Yeah, okay. And what when you say it was impacting, was it the isolation, or was it particular gruesome incidents that you saw or got involved in?
It was actually a combination of both, because there was two of us stationed in the community, but only one of us that was on call all the time. So I spent 19 months of being the only person on call. So I had no social life or anything like that at all, because I was constantly on alert. So there was that part, but there was also the trauma that I experienced by, different policing different events that took place that had a traumatic impact on my mental health. But I didn't know it at the time, because there was no support structure, certainly in a small community like that. But even in a bigger picture, the organization hadn't matured enough, especially in the mental health space.
Can you tell us the story of one of those incidences to give us an idea of how it impacted on you?
I certainly can. So I was in a small community, and we were putting together a men's hockey team that was going to go down the road to another small community, and we were going to have this big hockey game. And so we were having tryouts and that for our local team. And there was this young lad, 16 years of age, that came and tried out for the men's hockey team. And we selected him to come and play with us as part of the team. And he was just over the top. And a lot of us, we developed a friendship in that. And we were so happy and pleased for him that he was going to get this opportunity. So he decided he was going to go home and tell his parents how fortunate he was, and he was going to play hockey and all that sort of stuff. Only to find out when he gets home, both his parents are intoxicated beyond any imagination. And that caused him to, when he realized he had no one he could share his good news with, he went into the room that they stored all their guns, and he took a 22 rifle, and he death by suicide.
Oh my goodness! And he was 16.
He was 16.
And so just achieved this great thing.
Yeah, and so then from there, I end up, because I'm the one on call, I just finished skating with him just probably an hour earlier. Now I have to go to his house, to his mom and dad's place, and investigate his death. So that meant, going in, and we had to remove his body from the house. And I had to, it was in the middle of winter, so it was like 40 below. We stored his body in the garage until we figured out that being the junior man on the totem pole, I ended up having to transport his body from the small community to the closest morgue, which was 8 hours away by vehicle in the middle of winter. And so here's where it takes kind of a different shift, is that they didn't want me to travel by myself, but nobody would volunteer to go with me. So my wife to be at that time point, we were either engaged or we were getting engaged. Yeah. But my wife to be ended up getting the short straw and ended up having to go with me. So she traveled with me as we hauled the body out to the morgue, and then helped me facilitate at the morgue doing some things that we needed to get done before we could actually leave. So that we drove back to our community. And the first thing I did as soon as I got home was I went to the cabinet that I stored all my liquor in, and I took a bottle of scotch out, took the cap off, threw the cap away, and I drank the bottle of scotch, thinking that it was going to be the answer to what I was feeling. And all it did was it just compounded that feeling.
So that was the pivotal state. And you said it happened and you drank, a lot of us want to drink after something like that. I'm not sure a whole bottle of scotch, but that happened. But you said it took some time to realize that it was impacting on your mental health. How long did it take, and when and how did you realize the symptoms?
It would have been, it was actually probably 2 postings after that.
Oh my, there's some years then.
I got bounced quite a bit, bounced around quite a bit. So it would have been a couple of years.
Okay.
But the thing that is for me, what it was the fact that all of that stuff was going on, and I was searching for a solution, but there wasn't one available. It was every time that I got moved, I dragged the trauma from the last place. I dragged that with me, and it became, so my behavior would be triggered as a result of new experiences, but I would always be going back and remembering the time with the young lad and all of that.
But I just wanted to get in mind, because the people that you're dealing with there, you said early on, there's this problem of them getting drunk and you being called out to stop the fights and whatever happens from being drunk. And this young man killed himself because his parents were so drunk that he couldn't share his joy with them, that he got onto the hockey team. So you were still seeking the solution of the whiskey bottle while at the same time breaking up these drunken fights and that in the communities?
Yeah, it sounds kind of weird, but it and what sometimes triggered as a trigger was getting those calls, going to those calls and dealing with that, and then coming back to thinking I'm going to just go. I may as well stay up for a little bit because I'm probably going to get called out again. And so, oh, well, gee, why don't you just have a drink while you're sitting here waiting for the call? And it just there was trigger after trigger after trigger, and no support structure other than the liquor to be able to put into use.
And you said you were looking for a solution to that horrific evening and the journey with the body. What were you looking for exactly? Describe how the solution would be.
Oh, yeah. So for me, what I would have liked to have taken place is the aspect of not having to go to alcohol as the solution. So I needed somebody to talk to, and I had at that particular time point, I didn't have anyone. This was kind of the pre Deborah period where we were, going through uh, getting to know each other and all, starting.
Did you share on that night, because you had these long drives? You must have shared a bit in conversation driving there and driving back.
Yeah, we did. Well, yes, we did. And part of what came out of that was a deeper understanding on Deborah's part of what she would be getting herself into should we become a couple.
She still married you.
And she still married me.
That's it. We've got some now. People are thanking you, Doug, for getting up so early. Gita says, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Jennifer says, agree. Thank you for the interview. Gita sends virtual hugs over the story that you told us. No, sorry, Doug. Keep your comments coming in. We all suffered trauma in our lives. We're hearing a specific story now from a specific place. But if you've got any stories to tell and how it's impacted you, how you've got out of it, how you're still in it, just put it in the chat and we'll share it with Doug and I in our conversation. The symptoms of your mental illness was your behavior, was it, when you couldn't keep your temper? Give us the temper loss, or however you describe it, of when you first realized that something was going wrong.
Part of it was the aspect of my circle of friends seemed to be getting smaller because every time we would get together, there'd be massive consumption of alcohol, and I would then become the biggest jerk on the face of the earth, and nobody wanted that. Nobody liked that. And so, it had an impact on Deborah because it ended up, we used to jokingly say, and it really wasn't a joke, was, well, those are my friends. You can't interact with them unless you're going to behave. And me saying, well, these are my friends over here, and I'll just go and drink with them if I can't socialize with your friends. And so there was a back and forth sort of thing that went. But and this was one of the things that probably was that really truly started me on a path to discover what can I do to deal with the impact that I appeared to be having on my mental well-being. And that was when I was actually teaching a workshop, and Deborah had come with me, and we traveled. It was a 6-hour road trip to get to this location. And so she went with me, and at some stage during the course of the workshop, somebody turned and said to her, and I think I had a segment on mental health that I was doing, and I was telling a few stories around things that I had experienced and stuff like that. And long story short, she said, well, he doesn't know how lucky he is, because had his behavior not changed, the 2 kids and I were walking. We were going to have to leave him because of the abuse, the alcohol. Number one, the alcohol consumption had not reached or was not at a level that she felt that it should be. And number two, it was the verbal abuse was just getting to be too much, and she was concerned about how that would impact our two kids.
Can I just take you onto some more definitions here? I mean, there was alcoholism. In other words, you became an alcoholic. Correct me if that's wrong. You also were suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. Tell us what post-traumatic stress disorder is, because that was, I presume, you witnessing that particular evening that you told us about, but other things?
Yeah, so post-traumatic stress is a call it an illness for lack of a better choice of words, but what it is your body reacts to a traumatic event. And so that can be, as an analogy, somebody serving in the military and there being bombs going off and gunfire and all that all around them. And that triggers certain structures. So the body responds by, is it flight, fight, or and I can't remember the other one, but that's the body will trigger that sort of response to be able to do that. But post-traumatic stress, what happens with PTS is that your body can be triggered to remember certain events that were of a consequence to you because of what happened. So if I use, for example, I still can vividly, obviously, because I shared once again today, but I can still see that young lad, that 16-year-old lad. I still have triggers, flashbacks, memories, whatever you want to call them, of what took place with him. And that was 1977.
Okay, so what, we're 40 years ago or something. And so this is where that dreadful, whether it's a car accident or a bomb or what you saw, it doesn't get processed through our whole body and mind as such. It sort of stays lingering like a wasp and bites you occasionally, often when you're not knowing about it. So you got that? So you would be sitting doing something, and suddenly you'll get the scene of seeing this boy's body. Yeah. And so was it because of those scenes that you saw, that scene particularly, let's stick with that you kept going for the whiskey bottle? Or was there a part of you that was alcoholic anyway?
I think I became that.
Right. You became that because of the post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD.
Yeah, there was alcoholism in my family, so that, that's one factor. And I know, Deborah kept trying to get me to appreciate the fact that if you keep going down the path you're going to end up being like your father and other family members, if you don't deal with this. And if you don't deal with this, there could be other consequences. And of course, silly me, I just thought, well, I'll just have another drink and maybe she'll go someplace and I can continue to have my drink. So it was, it became something that I know for me that if I continued on that path, I could see myself getting to a stage where I couldn't live without it.
That's interesting. There's another sort of contradiction that I think is emerging from this. Your behavior or temper was against Deborah and your family, yet this was the one unit that was keeping you alive in a way and keeping you going. And it was because of the warning that they might leave that you which we'll talk about in a second. But I think what I want to know is what is this propensity that we have as human beings that when we are upset or when we, suffer from whatever we suffer from, that we lash out against those closest to us that we love? Why?
I wish I had that answer,
But when you were doing it, Doug, what did you were doing it. So what did you think you wanted Deborah and the children to become or to do?
I think, now as I reflect back now, I think what I was looking for was just leave me alone and let me drink.
Yeah. You were in that abyss that was, so it was basically a leave me alone thing, that you don't want to interact. We've got Geeta, I think, here is suggesting Goldster's Kath Temple. We have a series of sessions, Doug, to let you know, with experts on things. Kath is brilliant. PTSD can be healed in one session, even in 40 minutes, Kath says, better than talking therapy. And we hurt the ones we love because they love us unconditionally and we are ourselves with them. What do you reckon about that, Doug? I think, is that a wise statement?
Very wise. Yeah, very wise.
Yeah. And Sandra says, is it not true for all of us that a traumatic event of any sort remains with us vividly? I can recall every detail of traumatic events in my life. Is PTSD when you react adversely to these memories? Yes. Or is it that, yes, you do. I think, I mean, neither of us are qualified experts, but I think that's pretty right, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. So you can keep these memories vivid, however traumatic they are, but it's when you start lashing out against people and hitting the bottle that the PTSD kicks in. You went on, we sort of jumped the gun, but you went on to marry Deborah and have 2 children. What was it like? Because you weren't married on that dreadful night that we're talking about. How many years were you sort of happily married for? How many years was there a problem?
It would have been, we were married for just about 43 years. And I would say that the first 20 were a bit on the rocky side. And then we kind of both had a bit of an epiphany where it was learning to communicate with each other better and to not keep things bottled up inside. So, if Deborah did something that I didn't like, or I felt that it was disrespectful, just as an example, we would have that conversation and we would sort that out. And we actually became kind of role models for other couples who said, you two are the example of perfect love. And yes, at that particular time point, I would have to wholeheartedly agree that we were. But if you were to have backed the train up, 10 years, it was definitely wasn't like that.
What then, given that you had a rocky 20 years, which is a long time to be rocky, what kept you together?
It's what Deborah's story about, that she knew that inside that body of who used to be her husband or was her husband, that the real Doug that she married was there. And it was that but she wanted to be able to provide the support I needed to get out of that abyss that I was in.
And you said in your interview, with the very good interview, I recommend anybody to read it, in the Goldster magazine, I was picking on her. I needed to start my own healing journey.
Yeah.
Tell us some more about that.
It was me. And I think part of the thing that my thought process was that if I kept kind of picking away at her and getting her to sort of see things my way, believe it or not, that was going to make things all that much better, when in fact I was the one that needed to go on the healing journey, but I also needed support to be able to make that journey. And I was having to turn to her because there was no other place I could go at that particular time point. There was no place I could go to, find somebody that could go with me on this journey. And and sometimes, and I think that the difficult part is sometimes a lot of us, all that we're looking for is somebody that will listen and hear and who's non-judgmental. And um, I got that from Deborah, was that, we could sit on the couch and have that conversation about, what you said the other day, in front of friends and stuff like that, that hurt me. And so then, we could have an open and frank conversation about that.
That is, so she became your rock, and we're going to talk in a moment about mentors. She became your mentor.
Yeah, she did.
Okay. Yeah, that's because when you in the book you move forward and you ask, is there a solution? That solution is mentoring. But before we go to that, Geeta has come back with Kath Temple again here. EFT, emotional freedom technique. Have you heard of this, Doug?
Yes, I have.
Where you tap on points around the body while saying things and havening, stroking your opposite arm, shoulders down to palms, and slowly stroking your forehead and cheeks. Is that part of your recovery process, or you just know about it?
I've actually had a colleague, a friend of mine, that's actually done that and has shown me how to do EFT kind of on myself, for lack of a better choice of words. So yeah, I'm very, very much aware of that.
And does it work?
It does. Yeah, it does.
It's incredible. Geeta, Kath is currently doing a course on anxiety and depression, which is available on recordings too. And she did a 6-week course on adverse childhood experiences, which also should be available. After Geeta's question, I have to ask you: it's your children that went through the 20 rocky years. How's all that turned out?
Actually, really well. I'm very blessed that, not only with the PTS, but also with the grief and that, my daughter has certainly she's actually stepped into her mom's footsteps and is doing an admirable job. I'm very blessed that, that she's part of my healing journey. And my son, he's there when I need him. And, I guess for the most part, that's the most important thing, because I never had that, go back 20 years or even further. I never had that where I had people that I could turn to and say, I'm having a rough go of it here. What can you do to help me?
And your own childhood, was that adverse or happy?
Because it was, well, the answer to your question is adverse, and that's just because I was surrounded by alcohol, and it was my parents' generation at the time. Everything that they did was surrounded with alcohol. So they'd go to a community dance, there'd be drinking, they'd bring everybody back to the house, there'd be drinking. My dad and his brother, they would be out drinking, and I would be, myself and the hired help would be responsible then for taking the crop off the field because they were off drinking. So, it was not the best childhood.
So when you say that, I'm just thinking the pivotal traumatic experience was that young hockey player, age 16, who wanted to tell his parents about it, and they were off drinking. They were not interested. So did you see parallels there in your life that?
Well, they were there. The parallels were there, yeah. But I couldn't connect the dots. That's the best way to describe it. I just couldn't connect the dots.
I think we should say, because we've made reference to it, that Deborah, your wife and your rock and your mentor, sadly passed away a couple of years ago.
Yeah, she passed away from a very quick battle with cancer, and she passed away in February of 2021.
Mm. And you say in the interview something that interests me. When Deborah passed away, counselling was available, but I chose not to. And I needed hope. I couldn't drive past the hospital without crying. But you joined a bereavement group. Would be the difference between the counselling and the bereavement group?
The counseling was one-on-one, and the counseling would use different healing modalities to help me deal with the griefs that I had. And like uh, Kathy, who's said that she does EFT. That was one of the healing modalities we did. But we did. There's one that you do rapid eye movement. There's um, induced after death communication. There's a number of different things um, that you can do, and we did quite a number of those in one-to-one counseling. The bereavement part is the stuff I've been involved in has been group sessions done virtually for the time being, where we just talk. So we listen and hear about how, kind of how everybody's week went, and sort of give them a chance to talk their way through things, and that helps with the healing process.
Oh, that's very interesting. Um, you were, I mean, were a Mountie, what we call the Mounties. We talked about that a lot. Really tough, rugged, solitary man, a hero in a way. If you look, and you say something in the interview about the difference between men and women. You said, if a man reaches out for help, he's seen as weak, and he'd rather suffer than say he needs help. You must have come across that when you were this young man feeling the post-traumatic stress disorder come into you saying, no, I don't want to do it. When did that change in your mind?
I think that the loss of Deborah was what really sort of set me back and made me take that step to be able to say, I don't want to live my life like this anymore. I need to deal with it. And so I kept, instead of me throwing the letter from the hospital, from the people that do the bereavement and that, instead of me throwing their invitation letter to come to a session in the garbage, I needed to take that first step myself, because it's me who has to deal with how I'm feeling, and it's me who needs to be able to do the healing, not somebody else.
And when you went to the groups, when you first, were you mainly with women, or were there other men that had made that choice?
Not many men. If we had 30 people show up, I would say that, counting myself, there was probably 3 men.
Okay. And would you look at each other and think, we're the brave ones or we're the weak ones?
Well, I think in some cases it was, I hope nobody sees me here. So, not wanting to, number one, wanting to obviously seek help and be able to heal, but at the same time being male, not wanting to disclose that I'm actually going down that path. And I don't know where I'd be today if it weren't for those group sessions.
Yeah. And you still do them?
Yes, and I'm now a facilitator.
Which is what we're about to get on to. Suri says, knowledge of our internal world. That's just another comment came in, and I lost Suri. But I think you were saying the knowledge of our internal world to respond to the external world is important. Yes, stoic and spiritual is helpful. Are those terms sort of familiar to you, Doug?
especially the spiritual. I'm probably a lot more in touch with the spiritual side of my life. Even to the point where um, I've had, Deborah's come and visited me at nighttime, and all different things have happened in my life that have sort of, when I try to explain it to myself, the only answer I have is that's the spiritual side of my life,
Mm.
trying to help with the healing process.
And very, very interesting. Thanks for that. And Elaine Price seconds you as well. So it says that. And Celia says, I found that when I went to a bereavement group after the death of my husband, almost all were widows. So yes, that's a thing. Gita's thanking you for this. You're getting a great response here. I now want to go on to you. You've gone through this. You've got out. You no longer drink the whiskey, and you've dealt with the PTSD as much as possible. You are now a mentor. What does that involve?
So mentoring is working with individuals, with people on a personal and professional basis. So helping them obviously with their career development plans, but more importantly and first is to deal with the personal growth stuff. And so that's being able to, help somebody who's dealing with self-esteem, self-confidence, self-doubt, self-worth, all of those things. But more importantly, today also includes understanding or being able to be part of somebody's healing journey who is going through mental health challenges, such, as PTS, anxiety, all of those.
And do you do that as a one-on-one, or do you sort of chair a group, or just give us an idea of that?
Right now, it's still one-on-one. Ironically, I deal a lot with entrepreneurs who are starting businesses and dealing with stuff. And I actually have one individual that I'm working with right now. And the backstory was that our very first virtual meeting, I shared fairly quickly into the conversation a little bit about my personal story, the post-traumatic stress that I had and dealing with grief and all of that. And me sharing that helped develop a level of trust that she felt comfortable enough to share that she had been diagnosed with two or three different mental health challenges or issues, and that she was concerned about how that could impact her moving forward with her business. And I was,
what is the difference between a mentor and a therapist?
So a mentor is somebody that would be there to listen and hear, and be non-judgmental. A therapist is somebody that uses different modalities, but can, depending on the level of therapy that they are, they can. What's the words I'm looking for? They can actually prescribe.
They can steer you into a certain way. But you're not a therapist. You're a mentor. So that's and your clients, if that's the right word, are they mainly men or women?
Well, mainly women.
Yeah. And do you have any male clients that sort of break cover, as it were?
Right now, no.
I just wondering, sort of generally speaking, across all our societies, are there millions and millions of men walking around bottled up like you were, hitting the bottle, having a particular traumatic experience, and afraid to or unable to process it and talk about it?
Yes. Yeah. Then the even just looking at the bereavement group that I'm part of, and is that the one I'm in a small group of only four of us, two male, two female, and that's probably a bit of an anomaly because I take a look at our larger group, and it's probably 27 to 3, so 27 women to 3 men.
That's it. And I just wondered, and this is pure science fiction, I guess, what sort of place the world would be if the men were as open and went to process these things as the women were, how our society might be different.
Yeah, so take just what you said, take that and add to that the aspect of communicating effectively with your partner and all of that, which the women are better at communicating. So I know when I think of Deborah and I, she was always the one that would sit down on the couch and start to share her day and be. I would know when I was supposed to engage and when I was supposed to just listen. And it wasn't my opinion that was being sought. It was my ears that were being sought.
Yes. And of course, we are in an age now where people are listening less, aren't they? Because and so in fact, it might be getting worse than getting better.
Yeah, it certainly, I know I see that. And that's part of what I do with when I'm working with people in a mentoring capacity is I work on them to help them to be able to communicate more effectively.
And are many of the people that that are going through the same process that you've been through, are they Mounters? Are they police that were out in the outback, as it were, suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder?
What's interesting is that when I look at the people that are going to the group sessions, I'm the only one that's a police officer.
Okay. I wonder what that, whether the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, they must be much more aware of this now than they were when you were a young man.
Yeah, I believe that's most definitely the case. I'm part of another smaller group of just men that have come together to basically address the issue of, we have no one we can turn to and nobody understands, nobody gets it and all that sort of thing. And in that group, I believe there's maybe one other person that comes from a law enforcement type of a background. But that's a purely men's group. And it was, there was one of our group members had males coming to him and saying, this is what's going on in my life and I don't know how to deal with it. And so he pulled together, I think there's about 7 or 8 of us, and we go through much the same thing that you and I have been talking about it, which is, having that conversation and understanding that, it's okay to ask for help, and understanding that you're not alone, that you can, there's people that are there. Just reach out, extend your hand, and ask for help.
Yeah, we are not alone. I mean, this is the title and the argument of your book, which you begin with a quote, I think, from Thomas Edison that caught my attention. The doctor of the future will give no medication, but will interest his patients in the human frame, diet, and the cause and prevention of disease. What do you mean? Well, why did you pick that as a sort of?
So I'm a firm believer in medication isn't the answer to everything. And that's kind of where I was heading with that particular quote, was the fact that we are far too often, it seems to be the easy way out. We'll just prescribe medication and things will go away. And and will be healing okay. But what we need to be able to do is not so much focus on the medication, but to focus on what's the root cause of and deal with it before you have to prescribe medication.
Yes, because the problem was not the whiskey; it was the boy that killed himself, wasn't it? So there's a different thing. Geeta asks, how can people join your groups, Doug? I've just put in the chat, Geeta, if anybody else wants to know, Doug's email, his website, and anything like that. So if you want any more information from Doug, we can do that. Celia says, as we depend more and more on social media, we lose more of the actual face-to-face communication. Dead right. This must be pushing more sad and bereaved people further into the shadows. That, I think, is true, isn't it? Doug, stick with us for a moment. I have got to tell everybody what wonderful guests we have coming up, and then I'm going to return to you for some final pithy thoughts on this great thing that we've been discussing. Let me see what we've got coming up. Right, yes, tomorrow. No, not tomorrow, August the 3rd, Thursday. My guest on Inside Story is Dan Kazita, a chemical weapons expert, and his book that I have somewhere around but can't see it at the moment is called Toxic. So that's a history of nerve agents from Nazi Germany to Putin's Russia. But he's also written a fantastic book that's coming out about the Baltics. That's the resistance fighters against the Soviet Union and the Nazis. And I've just spoken to him before we were talking to Doug. Absolutely fascinating character. Actually American, moved over to Britain because he fell in love with an English girl. And that's it. August the 4th, I talked to Dr. Elizabeth Ekstrom on her book, The Gift of Aging. And she's a specialist in aging from Portland, Oregon. Hence, we have a very special time in the afternoon of 4 p.m. If we'd known that, we might have offered you a later time, Doug. But 4 p.m. on August the 4th, which is Friday. August 24th, I'm with Harry Bucknell. That's an adventurer, an author, a walker, and he's just done thousands of miles around the United Kingdom on a book, A Road for All Seasons. And my book of the month on August the 25th, after stiff voting and democratic competition amongst Goldster members, The Bullet That Missed by Richard Osmond. The runner-up to that, which we're now going to have at the end of September, is The Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. So two cracking books at different ends of the scale. So it shows what we have here. We've got a couple of more in, Doug, but we've had a fantastic conversation. What are your thoughts after this conversation? Have you got any sort of advice, tips for us of how to get through these things?
The big thing is I think most importantly is to be able to understand that you're not alone and to reach out when you need help and not keep everything bottled inside, because that doesn't do anyone any good whatsoever. So if there's anything that I can share or suggest is, don't be afraid to extend your hand and ask for help. And when somebody extends their hand to you and says, can you help me? Please take that person's hand and just listen and hear what it is that they've got to say, because sometimes that's all that they want.
And looking back, you had a pivotal moment when you thought Deborah and the children could be leaving you because of what you were doing. But looking back now, was there a time that you could have reached out your hand to somebody who would have taken it?
Yeah, it was where it became abundantly clear to me that I needed help, but there was 1977 is when it started. And so I was all the trauma and everything else that I was experiencing. And we've only shared one story today with the young lad. There are countless many that I experienced. And I don't want to see anyone else go down that same path that I did. So you need to be able to reach out and ask
Shout
for.
the hand, yeah, and take the hand. Gita gives you another hug and says thanks so much. And there is a point that Sandra made before we sign off. We are still guilty as adults of promoting a different response from boys and girls. Yes, for everyone to grow up and know that it is acceptable to ask for help when needed. We need to educate ourselves.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah. She's hit the nail on the head there, I think, hasn't she? That is this has been a one. But time's winged chariot is upon us. The clock ticketh, and until tomorrow, with the maestro and chemical weapons expert, and how that impacts on all our lives. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Stay safe, stay curious, stay involved, stay mentoring, or ask to be a mentor, and take that hand if it reaches out for you, and listen. And of course, stay Goldster. Tell your friends, enemies, and families about our great Goldster conversations that we've just had. And thank you, Doug Lawrence, so early in the morning and all the way from Canada, for sharing your story and your solutions. Thank you, Doug. You've been a great guest. Bye, everyone.